Rod, 34-3. Nice little bounce back there after the last 3 weeks of football. You think Debo and Trent being back, that's kind of sounds like it's kind of an important thing.
Nope. It's all about Steve Wilkes being on the sideline. That's all it is. So now he's stuck on the sideline and in those same drawers and socks. He can't change anything now since that's what matters. Jesus. No, yeah, I think it looks a little different when you got Big Trent out there clearing the way, and people like I think Daryl Johnson said it. They've been running the same plays. They just look different when Trent and Debo are out there. Yeah, I mean it was it was really it was just we weren't playing well. It's just, we were missing people. Another one is Dre Greenlaw. His presence made that felt, and it just seemed like the energy was different. Dudes are rallying to the ball. They're not missing tackles. They're getting off blocks, and all of us. I mean, when you're doing those things, you win football. You dominate football games. So that was, I guess everything all is well now. Again, I guess. The sky is not falling.
Well, here and the other thing, and I don't know if it's just one player who comes in, that being Chase Young, but all of a sudden the pass rush was back. The front four were dominating again, and you can see, and we've talked about this, how well that works with the secondary, because they just Trevor Lawrence, he was rushed, and that forced him into some bad throws. Then all of a sudden you get a throw that's a little bit too early that donks off of the hands of the receiver and into the waiting arms of Hufanga. They also sacked him and he fumbled, and then later they rushed him, and it was more towards the end of the game. But Fred Warner's the only guy within 10 feet, and he picks off a pass. So they worked in tandem very well. And I do wonder if we're going to hear something from Shanahan about how more in sync he and Wilkes were because he was on the sideline instead of in the box. Because I mean, it did seem like, maybe for the first time in a few weeks, that what they were doing, because the blitz, if it's a surprise, then you get what we saw. If it is sort of predictable and you can be like, Peyton Manning, and you're just counting guys and you're basically telling your offense, okay, this is what we do, then maybe it's not as successful. It did seem like there were a couple of surprises where Trevor Lawrence was just like, I have no idea where the rushers are coming from, and I'm just going to fall down because I don't want to throw an interception.
I mean, I will completely admit that a lot of things about scheme I don't know about. But one thing I do know is that it doesn't matter what scheme it is. If the guys can't get off blocks, if the guys aren't rallying to the ball, and if the guys aren't covering, there's no scheme that fixes fundamentally bad football. I don't know. And again, I completely poo-poo the difference being in the box or being on the field. Kyle could, again, as he said, if he wanted to change a call, it's in the headset. So it doesn't matter where he's at. And if being on the sideline or in the booth matters, please explain to me how 5-0 leading the league and the fewest points allowed. If it matters, how come it didn't matter then? Yeah. They just weren't playing well. And so put him on the field, put him on the sideline, put him on the bus, put him in a drone. It doesn't matter. If the dudes play like they played today, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. But I think I was really, really, Dre Greenlaw makes a huge difference, it appears.
He looks fast today.
But I think I don't know. I'm not a big woo-woo guy, but I think he brings an energy to the team, and we've talked about it before. Sometimes that energy can cross the line sometimes. But like I've said, if I've got to take a 15-yard penalty here or there, in exchange for what he brings, I'll take that every time because that dude is a football player. And it just seems like, that was a big difference. Those guys were really rallying to the ball in a way that we just weren't.
Well, and that was what Shanahan said last week, right? The energy wasn't there. And someone like Dre brings a ton of it. And maybe he even sees that as his role. It's like, I gotta fire these guys up by the way that I play. So that was great to see. I didn't want to,
or maybe Wilkes was on the sideline firing him up, which is what the faithful have been saying.
It seemed to me that he had to leave the sideline to go like write stuff down. It seemed like a little harder for him to do his job on the sideline,
because that's what, watching everything I've seen of Steve Wilkes in training camp and then these first 9 weeks of the season, he really seems like a guy who really is going to get you hyped up and fired up. That seems like his personality is to be in your face and like leading the dance on the sideline. That's sarcasm, you guys. That seemed like the opposite of the kind of guy.
I mean, and it is a different type of coach because Saleh and Ryan's even more. Ryan's was very demonstrative. Ryan's was like another player on
he's a player. I mean, so that is, but from what I witnessed in training camp, that was the role that Kukorac and Johnny Holland seemed more than capable of. Those dudes are that guy. They are the rah-rah, hype up kind of dudes. And that's why I thought, I didn't have, it didn't seem like a big issue to me. Him being in the booth, them doing that thing on the sideline seemed perfect. But I mean, if that's, if we're just changing it up, sometimes changing it up just for the sake of changing it up works. But I just, I think that anytime you start putting things like that ahead of, these dudes aren't getting all blocks, they're not tackling, they aren't covering. As soon as we start making it about extraneous stuff, I think you're in trouble. If we start talking about the refs, we start talking about Steve Wilkes being
the refs are really bad today, by the way.
Yeah, they were. But I think that it's always been my feeling that players miss plays, coaches make bad calls, refs do what they do. But I mean, to me, it's kind of like you start blaming the refs, it's kind of like blaming the weather. I mean, because it just where they need to be held accountable for their poor performance, and they are. We just don't get to see it. But as a participant, there are plenty of other things. There are all like the Jacksonville Jaguars could like complain about calls, but that ain't why they lost by 31. It's not because there wasn't a ref call. Is why they got their doors blown off and Trevor Lawrence threw 2 picks and was under siege all day. That wasn't because of the refs.
Well, Shelvin, our eyes and ears, said that Shanahan said it's nice to see him a little more and not just hear his voice. So that's Shanahan's explanation of Wilkes being on the sideline.
If it makes him feel better, I mean, that's great.
Well, the way that I saw it, and I explained it on my little preview that I did that was up for the podcast feed only. I sort of see it as Shanahan, and in order to be an NFL coach, you have to be this way, I think. He has such a type A personality. He wants things done in a specific way that makes him more comfortable. And with Wilkes being up in the booth, Shanahan probably felt, maybe there's things that he's unable to see from me, whether it's like a physical or like a face or something, or just a vibe to where he just likes it better. He's more comfortable. He's more faithful that, that they're on the same page when they're next to each other versus being on a headset. So I sort of feel like Shanahan was waiting for this to happen to where he could kind of maybe, push his weight a little bit to go, hey, this is kind of how I like it. Let's do it this way since, this way wasn't working. But like you said, 5-0 was great until it wasn't. And now, what happens if the defense doesn't play well? Does Wilkes then go, hey, can I go back up to the booth now?
Can I change my underwear?
Look, it's got to be an adjustment for him, right? Because he's comfortable doing it one way. Shanahan wasn't comfortable doing it that way, and now Wilkes is going to have to, he's got to be comfortable, because honestly, it is him without the security blanket, because he is the new guy. He has not been in this system. If there is, you can blame. They'll be able to make some blame if they don't win the Super Bowl this year about certain moves or about players. But the one inconsistency on the coaching staff was bringing in a guy who was outside of the tree. And so he's, he kind of comes in already with a slight bullseye on his back. And so I think he probably feels like, hey, it might be up to me to make some of these changes, just so that the cohesion and the way that they do it, the way that they've done it, isn't changed. So I commend him for it.
It hasn't changed. That dude has had to come in and learn the way they've done it. So it's not like, he's somebody with this ton of experience, but it's not like they're running his defense. He's had to come in.
Oh yeah.
And learn the way they do it. And so, if we talk about at the end of the season, that's the difference. Well, the fact of the matter is, it was either going to be you're going to have this new guy from outside of the system, or you're going to go with Kukurik or Holland and have somebody who is a first year DC. So either way,
there was adjustments that were
going to be, so these dudes have, and I think that's undersold. If you've never run a defense before, you want to talk about growing pains.
Yeah.
It's just being from a position coach to a coordinator is a completely different jump. And sometimes, then I think I said this in the offseason, is that I'm always kind of leery of that. If you're somebody like Kukurik, who is a great position coach, I think you try, unless that is just something that he has a burning desire to do, I would just as soon try to make him the most, give him his money, because that's important to all of us. And that's mostly why guys want to make that jump, is because coordinators make much money, more money than position coaches. But if I can make you the highest paid position coach and still, and then give you more responsibilities, if that's part of it, if you just feel like you want to do more, well, we can do that. Let's try to max that out. I would like to see that in all walks of life. Let's try to max people out instead of the Peter principle, which says you promote somebody to their level of incompetence. Let's not do that. Let's just try to grow you as best we can in the role you're in. And if you get to the point, or again, like I say, some guys, you see it at coordinator, where they go on to be head coaches because the check is bigger as a head coach. They make that check and then they go back to being a coordinator. Why couldn't we just pay them at the top end of the scale, or extend the scale of a coordinator, and not go through this whole thing of, the example I was talking about with somebody just this week is like a Vic Fangio. He got that big check in Denver, and it was a disaster. But he is, one of the preeminent defensive minds of the past 20 years. Why did he have to go to be, to be a head coach to get that bread? Just give him, just make him.
There's no coaching's cap, the coach salary
exactly.
cap.
They've been paying Josh McDaniel amounts of money as a coordinator for a long time, and you see that's probably where he's best suited. Going back to Boston, man. But
you know why they don't do that though, is because every time they raise the pay scale, the owners are like, "Hey, man, now we got to pay these guys all of
them got to get." Yeah, exactly. Because I guess that does create an issue if you're just paying this one guy and then everybody else, all the other coaches are still making minimum wage. That's kind of, that creates an issue. But yeah, so
I mean, imagine, not to pick on the Raiders because I think they've been picked on enough of late, but Mark Davis historically not the richest owner in the world. So if all of a sudden the normalized linebackers coach gets bumped up a couple 100,000, then he's like, hey, like, now I might have to let mine go and bring somebody up just to get back to the number that I'm comfortable paying. So that, I think that's a lot of what it is.
Or
All
you
right.
stop, or you do like Mike Brown and stop having coaches, like in Cincinnati. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say we leaned a little negative in the beginning, but most of this game was positive. So we'll focus on what happened in Jacksonville. As I was doing my research and looking at this game, I thought there was a little bit of a falseness to Jacksonville's run. But the thing about it is winning can be so contagious that sometimes no matter who you beat and how you beat them, the confidence just goes way up. So that's why I wasn't willing to say, I think the Niners are going to beat these guys and beat them well. Because the thing that worried me about Jacksonville was some of the things that the Niners were struggling against these last few games, which is Jacksonville's secondary turns the offenses over because of how the style of play, and the Niners were clean today. So you took away Jacksonville's biggest strength defensively, and you sort of saw who they eventually were. Now, I don't think, if you ask Jacksonville fans, they probably thought that their offense would do a little bit better against the Niners defense. And if you watched any of the last 3 games, you probably thought that as well. And so the Niners defense stepping up the way that they did, the pass rush being so in Trevor Lawrence's face consistently. Like, there were a couple times where he almost took phantom Jim Everett sacks just because he was feeling it more so than it was necessarily there. And he knew it was almost like, okay, I got a second and a half to get rid of this ball. And if I have to hold on to it because someone's not open, I just need to fall down because or else I'm going to take a crazy hit. And you saw that a couple times. So that's where, the pass rush is on fire, is when the quarterback is feeling it and just going down so that he doesn't get killed. I will say, though, the idea that the Niners defense was going to come into Jacksonville and dominate the way that they did, it tells me a lot about the coaching staff's ability to solve some problems. And this is why the bye week was so helpful, because this team looked completely different than the last time we saw them play. Chase Young is some of it. Dre Greenlaw being healthy is some of it. There were some issues with guys being on an island and, the pass interference penalties. Mooney Ward is racking up these pass interference penalties. He's not getting the opportunity to use his hands as much and to be physical in some of these games. Ambry Thomas got caught.
Of those were, I know I'm not one that beats up on the refs, but a couple of those were like super, super tight. Where he was, if we want to count the yards, he was probably at 6 instead of 5.
Yeah, I know.
But it's just so. But again, like Johnson said, at a certain point, you got to know
how the refs are calling.
You got to recognize how they're calling it, and it just, again, like I was saying, talking to somebody last week about against like the Bengals, and good, you can't touch Jamar Chase after 5 yards. Good luck. I mean, I don't know who's gonna be able to guard these guys if you can't touch them. It's so hard for a defensive back to be able to do anything. But like you say, it's just it's a reality. He's getting called. It's almost like Josh Norman at a certain point where you just, if that's your game, if getting up on a guy and being physical is your game, you're playing in the wrong era.
Yeah, and that's my worry, which is as we get closer to the playoffs and in some of these big games, the referees, and this may be a trend, this may be me finding fault where fault doesn't exist. but sometimes it becomes reputational. And
Oh, for sure.
And if you are in a big game, and let's say the Niners have, they played the Seahawks, and there's a big physical receiver on the other side. That physical receiver is going to get away with doing way more than the defender will be able to get. That's just the way that football has always been.
And we've seen it, like, if there's like a close play on a hit, a dude like Greenlaw is never going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Never.
If it's close, you're going to get the 15. It's just, like you said, it's just reputational. We saw it, in a different sport the other night with
Draymond.
With Draymond. It's just, and that's just baked into it.
They're creating rules. Draymond. I was like, that rule doesn't exist. How does that work?
They just made it up on the fly. We're gonna go back and look at the last play. What are we doing? What are we doing? But yeah, it's just like you said. It's a thing that is not your imagination. That's a thing.
Yeah,
it's gonna be if he's on DK Metcalf and he tries to get the least bit physical with him, it's probably not gonna go our way. It's just that's just which is complete. How do you guard DK Metcalf if you can't get fit? If you're just gonna give this dude free releases off of the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a long ass night. You just, you're not going to be able to win if you can't be physical with that dude. So it's an issue. That's why I think, going back to what we were talking about in the very, very beginning, getting the defensive line right is paramount. And I think that injection of talent lifted all ships today. Having somebody, because no disrespect to Drake or Farrell, we got a huge talent upgrade with Young, and we had a Hargrave sighting today.
Yeah.
He has been MIA for the past 2 weeks, and we spent more time blaming Steve Wilkes than looking on the field and saying, well, where the hell is this? Where's the $84 million man?
Yeah.
It's just, but his presence was felt. I think he had a sack and a half today. Yeah. So, it's just, I think it's all of it, because, when you slot Farrell in where, now he's like our third or fourth end, it's different, so I think that moving forward, the defensive line is going to give our secondary a lot more help. We were able to get some effective snaps from Ambry Thomas today. It looks like the Isaiah Oliver experiment may be, if not over completely, we will be seeing more of Demo at slot. It looks like
Demo had a little bit of a rough game, though, I thought.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
There was a moment where they ran to the outside, and whenever I see a run to the outside, I don't really watch the guy with the football. I kind of watch where the defense is, because that tells me more about whether or not it's going to be a big play or short yardage. And so I'm watching him, and I see him, and I was like, oh, he just took the inside angle instead of trying to close the whole thing off. And then he missed the tackle.
And he did not play his responsibility. I never played football, but I was on the team and I practiced, and I know if you are the outside guy, you got to keep your outside. You cannot let them cross your face. And that's what he did. And you, like you say, if you're going to do that, if you're going to go inside, you goddamn sure better make the tackle.
You got to make
the tackle. So yeah, but, so that is just, again,
it didn't burn them.
Right.
Him
but
playing,
you gotta play your responsibilities.
Yeah. And if he is going to get more snaps, him being on the field in games like this is beneficial. But that I'm sure there's going to be some situational stuff where, if the offense is running a slightly bigger set, then maybe Oliver plays
Mhm.
because he's a bigger guy, he's a slower guy. If there's a possibility of them running out of a situation like that, he's a really good
He's a
tackler.
real solid run player.
Yeah.
I think it just again plays in the wrong era. They just because there just really aren't that many big slots anymore. The slot receivers are normally smaller, faster guys, and those dudes just seem to be a really tough matchup for him. You know, he's just a bigger physical guy, and those dudes just kind of juke him, and he's just in a trail position. So
You know
yeah.
who he reminds me of a little bit? You remember Mike Rumpf, who the Niners
Mm-hmm.
drafted?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, now we're talking like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
How is Mike Rumpf 20 years ago? Bigger corner. They had to move him to safety because he was much better tackling than he was
Mm-hmm.
covering. And that's who Oliver reminds me of. I didn't even know this. Because I wanted to look to see when the Niners drafted. Mike Rumpf is a recruiting coordinator at the University of Miami right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
There you
he's
go.
another guy we were just talking about. Mooney Ward. He was a dude that at corner, if he could get his hands on you, you know, it was a wrap for you. But yeah, it was one of those things where if you were fast and he couldn't get his hands on you, it was gonna be a long day for Mike Rump. And like you
I
say, that move into safety was very beneficial to him because you just couldn't leave him out there alone.
I actually undersold him. Assistant director of recruiting at Miami.
Go ahead, Mike Rump.
There you go.
Give out that NIL.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wonder how many times he is on the phone with Uncle Luke every day.
Uncle Luke, we need another check.
All right, let's talk about the offense here. We've talked a lot about the defense. The story of this game, especially as we got to later in the game, was whether or not Christian McCaffrey was going to get his shot at the end zone to make it 18 games to break this long-standing record.
Hoping we would get here. Go ahead. Sorry.
They couldn't do it. They really tried at the end. Like, they decided to bring him back in the game, which I thought was kind of ridiculous, just from the idea that we need to put this guy, we need to bubble wrap him after every single game is over. And they gave him a shot. They got down to, I don't know what it was, the 4-yard line or whatever. And he got the ball like 4 times in a row, couldn't get in. And finally it was, the streak was over here. But I wanted to see him get it. I thought he could have gotten it earlier in the game, but they just went away from him in the first half. But that was, they tried. And again, you talk about the most impactful player on the offensive side of the field. CMC again, 6 yards per carry almost. He had 6 catches at 8 yards per clip. He's just the guy who makes this whole engine run. And it's so fun watching him play football that I'm just like, gosh, where's this guy been all my life?
I was so glad to see them do that because I think this is a thing that just gets completely undersold. You could see it on the field. Those dudes wanted to get that for him.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
okay, we talk about the injury risk and blah, 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 but there is a benefit to when everybody is so hyped about getting someone an individual accolade, because it's an individual accolade, but it's an individual accolade that everybody takes pride in getting, and you can see it in the guys. And I was just so happy that Kyle was in tune enough with his team to see that those guys, it wasn't meaning it was garbage time, but that wasn't meaningless to them. They really wanted to get that for him. And I think those are the kind of things, those are team building moments that and it wasn't successful, but I thought it was really, really cool to see that
Yeah.
number one, not even so much the record, it was the fact that his teammates were so hyped about giving him the shot at it. And that the coaching staff listened, or didn't just, like you say, just put him in bubble wrap and just not. It's important. I just think it's important to be in tune to what your team wants, especially we were on a losing streak. The game was in hand. I get that, but I'm glad we're talking about it, and I was glad to see that they made the
I was
effort.
watching like this.
Yeah, I mean, it would. I mean, if he blows out his ACL, then everybody gets fired probably. But yeah, it was good to see. I wish he would have gotten it, but it's over now. So yeah.
So Brock Purdy was his at the end of the day, his stats look amazing.
Mm-hmm.
He is still the number 2. I think he's number 2 in the NFL from a QBR perspective, or no, from quarterback rating perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So even those 3 games where he did not play well, the first 5 games, just his numbers are so great, and then so he's back to the numbers of the first 5 games. I didn't think he played fantastically in the first half, and I was a little frustrated with the play calling. I was just like, I would watch Christian get the ball once, and I'm like, oh wow, that's like 6 yards before defense is even anywhere near him. Why aren't we doing that like more? And I get it from a Shanahan perspective. He's probably seeing things in the defense where he's like, yeah, they're just keying on Christian so much. We have so many things that we can open up downfield, but they weren't really doing it. They had the really good first drive, and it's like, oh wow, they're back to hitting like they were in the winning streak. And then it just kind of went into a lull, and they're blitzing Brock, and he's looking a little confused, and he's trying to run, and he's going back to the intentional grounding stuff. And then I think there was a couple of situations where I thought, maybe just take the sack because you're scrambling, opening yourself up to getting hit, worse. So there were moments like that. And then at the end of the first half, they got that field goal. Jake Moody just snuck it in the upright, like after the game, like 3 tries. And I went into halftime thinking like, okay, 13-3, terrific. But this game really should be like 24-3. Like, not like there's meat on the bone that they left. And then in the third quarter, they kind of reversed that, and they did the things that I wanted to see them do before, and they kind of ran away with it. But overall, what did you think of Brock's play? The numbers at the end look great, and I did think that he was fantastic in the third quarter, especially finding Kittle one-on-one to kind of blow up the beginning of the third quarter. Was a great throw, and for him to hang in there like he did. But overall, what's your thoughts about Brock?
I thought that the Jacksonville defensive staff did a very good job of showing him some really difficult looks for him, pressure wise, after the first quarter. And it just took him a while to adjust. And it took the coaching staff a while to give him the protection and the looks that he needed to get. But I guess it was kind of choppy, but like you say, overall, spoiler alert, he's my player of the game offensively.
There you go.
So I thought that he was really good, especially taking into consideration that he had that stretch that where he just looked a little confused. And they were doing some interesting stuff. They, stuff like putting 2 ends on one side and giving Trent a two-way look of defensive ends coming at him, and they did, him and Feliciano didn't handle it well, and they pressured Brock. So I mean, he's seeing stuff like that, and he's confused a little bit, but he came out of it and had an excellent third quarter. And again, we tend to forget that since he got off to such a great start, he's still a young player.
Yeah.
And there are going to be lulls. Like those past 3 games. I mean,
that was my takeaway really with the play calling in the first half, which was Shelvin and I were going back and forth, and Shelvin was really handling the Discord today because I started late, and then I had to take a break, and then I caught up. But Shelvin was keeping things moving in there, so thanks to Shelvin for that. But my takeaway was we should be proactively setting Brock up against these blitzes instead of having him hang out in the pocket so much and make the decision whether, because sometimes he's a little bit more gunslinger than the arm. The mind is gunslinger and the arm's not always gunslinger. And I was like, let's call some screens. Let's call some draws. Let's run plays where the over reliance on the blitz is going to really make them pay for it. But the way that I saw it, I was like, well, Shanahan's calling plays like this dude is Aaron Rodgers.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was at the cardiologist this week, and there's a dude, he came in and he had full Iowa State regalia on, and we got to talking about Brock Purdy, and he was like, it's great to see him in the league and how poised he is because Brock's got a lot of YOLO in him.
So you saw the first touchdown pass was all YOLO. My God, I had to hold my breath when he put that ball in the air.
So yeah, it was funny to hear somebody who's watched his whole college career. He said Brock is really a gunslinger, and we didn't really see that in the beginning of his run, but as he has gotten more comfortable, we have seen flashes of it.
When I saw it was that, remember the Raiders game last year?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was like, okay, like this guy, he thinks he's got the Trevor Lawrence arm, and sometimes that that can bite him in the butt. But also, I'm sure there are some defenses that they're like, nah, he's not going to make this throw, and all of a sudden he makes it, and it just like this Kittle thing, right, where he hung in there and made that throw, which was so impressive because Kittle one-on-one against a linebacker. I'm sure Kittle sees that opportunity and he's like, in the Jimmy G era, that's getting dumped off because Jimmy does not trust the ability to not get hit. And he's like, wow, I beat this guy, and Brock put that ball and he hung in there. And that's really, to me, that's like the thing where if you're Kittle, you're just like, this dude, this is what makes him different than Jimmy, because Jimmy's dumping that off, or Jimmy's throwing it at somebody's feet because he knows that hit is coming. So,
and look, Jimmy's not, and he's not wrong necessarily.
No,
but you'd rather have a guy who is willing to hang in there and put it out there. And I mean, look, he was the linebacker was in a position where when Brock threw it, there is a what percentage of chance is that linebacker going to get his head around and make a play on that football? So turning the ball over in that situation is really not the concern. It's either you give George an opportunity to make a play, or it's an incompletion. There's from the position that dude is in, the defender is in, there's no way he gets himself in a position where he is able to turn that ball around in the other direction, which is always a concern when you go deep like that. You don't want him turning the ball over. But I think from that standpoint, it was a low risk attempt. No more than, like you say, he risked taking a big shot. That if you want to, and I guess that is a risk.
I mean, that is more of it, which is, can I throw this football with the confidence that I'm going to get hit at the same time? And this is the difference. And so some of my family are Raider fans, and I just I saw my cousin yesterday. I was like, I'm sorry, man. Like, you got the version of Jimmy that's like the dog that has an abusive owner, and is just, every time you say something, the dog is kind of cowering. Like, you got the version of Jimmy of, I'm hurt, I get injured every year. If I take a big hit, I'm making a business decision here on my future of my career. Like, when we first got Jimmy, that was not his concern. And that's what made him such a fan favorite early on, is he played a lot like Brock, where we're like, is he really going to throw that ball? He threw that ball, and he was making plays because of it. And then over the years, his career went to a little bit of it. We had much more of a safe Jimmy over the years. So it is nice to see Brock kind of get back to some of the things that the fun Jimmy was able to do. But I told my cousin, I was like, I'm sorry, man, you got the beat up version of Jimmy, and I don't think that's gonna work. Not without Kyle there figuring it out for him. So all right, let's talk a little bit more about the offense. Ayuk, when I look at Ayuk's numbers, and they were kind of conservative. It's not these gaudy numbers. He was a 3 for 55 with a touchdown. And when I think about him, all I thought about was like, man, this guy's probably got 5 or 6 catches, 100 yards, and you look and it's only 3 for 55. But I think it was those 3 catches were just such big plays and such statements that they were bigger than what I maybe thought that they were. But he just seems to be so in sync with Brock. He seems to be running these guys into the ground with his routes, where he's got so much space when he catches the ball to move. I just love what he's been doing this year. And he's making himself some money.
Oh yeah, there's no question that he's going to get paid. The only question is, are we going to be the team?
Is it going to be us
that pays him? And I don't know. I think that I wonder if we have seen kind of an organizational sea change. We made Nick wait to get his money. So it'll be interesting to see this offseason if Ayuk is gonna be asked to play out his 5th-year extension. And then which, if you look at all the moves they've made, it would not surprise me if they decide they're not putting any more big money on the books until 2025. And then, because at that point they will have a ton of decisions to be made, and then you can just kind of reshape the team. At that point, you ride this team out through next season, and then you move forward from there. But I would be, if it were my team and or my money, I'd be trying to get that dude locked up sooner rather than later, because
if Brock is your longtime future, you need his best chemistry receiver. You want those guys playing in lockstep for many years to come. You don't want to have to then find a new guy and recreate that.
Well, you're gonna, I've been having this conversation online, but yeah, it's going to be it will be different if you decide you're going to give Brock 4 for 180. It's going to be the way that that will be the next step. We see. I have full faith and confidence in Brock Purdy running this team. Do I know if Brock Purdy, Ayuk, and the Pips is going to what does that look like? I don't know. You mean you got Travis Kelce and a bunch of dudes basically with Patrick Mahomes now. Yeah. And we see that, if you're going to pay a quarterback $40 or $50 million, in most cases, that's where you're not going to be able to have an all pro stable of playmakers. That's just not how it works. So now we got him at 700,000 and we're able to surround him with all pros. If you're paying him $45 or $50 million, that's not going to be the case. So you need, but you need to have one. And if I were going to pick, I want to have them all, obviously. But if I was going to pick one to reshape the offense once Brock is getting paid, if that's what happens, of all these guys, it would be Christian, but he'll be like 32 at that point, and
Yeah.
he's a running back. But beyond that, if it was going to be somebody who other than a 32-year-old running back, it would be Brandon Ayuk for sure.
Yeah. He's got everything that he's done this year shows me that, I don't even know how the Niners hierarchically see him and Debo, but he's got number one receiver written all over him, the way that he
And
handles
the way
himself.
I see it is he is definitely wide receiver one, but I still say that Debo is a more explosive playmaker.
Oh yeah, Debo's the utility knife. Debo's the
Yeah.
I mean, you just saw how much he added to the offense. Ray could run some of those plays,
Yes.
but if they sniff out the play and Ray gets knocked around his ankles, he may go down. If they sniff out the play, Debo's going to get through two tacklers,
For sure.
then he has a chance to break it.
And you just
and
see
that's what's
with the defense, just the way when he's running that fake jet sweep versus when Ray is running it, there's a completely different reaction to the defense. Everybody on the defense is taking note of, does Debo have the ball? Because like you say, if he does, it's like a bowling pin and it's a bowling ball, and it's going to be a problem. It's just like his presence it just changes things. It just changes things.
Him having the ball on that play, there's a lot of demo guys who are going to try and just dive at his foot because they don't want to sit on the outside and try and take him down. And so they're making that decision. Ray, I bet you, this is kind of a thing where, maybe he was born, 30 years too early or something, but Ray, imagine Dexter Carter in the Ray position, right? Like you can use a football player like that. Dexter Carter probably watches football today and goes, I wish I could have been used like that instead of them trying to make me a lead running back where the team knows every time I get the ball, it's got to go to the outside because I'm too small to run inside. And that makes them solely predictable.
I was talking to somebody about that. I don't know. I think it might have been at the barbershop. Could you imagine Reggie Bush in a Kyle Shanahan offense?
Yeah, it would be amazing.
Percy Harvin. I mean, guys like that, they just played the game in an era when the offenses didn't have the language to use. They couldn't utilize them to the full extent of their talents. NFL offenses were just so old and stodgy that, like you say, Dexter Carter, he has to be a running back. I mean, we didn't have the vocabulary to use him, in unique or varied ways. We had to use him like you use Walter Payton or running back X. Whereas, even like Roger Craig, he was fortunate to play for somebody like Bill Walsh, who was able to see the short passing game as just an extension of the running game and get that big ass dude out there with a swing pass and get him out, in space on DBs, and safeties and linebackers, and put them, in a shredder,
giving out concussions with his knees.
Right. So it takes, offensive guys with offensive forethought to advance things. Like, it's funny, I've been watching a little bit of the Texans. I watched them all last week and then some of it this week, and it's interesting to see
today.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how Slowick has kind of turned Tank Dell into like their Debo. It's really, and you see that around the league where guys are using. I think Cleveland was doing that a little bit with Elijah Moore, where you're just, taking these guys who are multi-talented and actually using those talents at other positions. Like Tank Dell is not just a receiver; he's a weapon. And I just think that's a really cool advancement. It's always kind of been like that in college, but it like we were talking about just a minute ago, it hasn't always been that way in the NFL.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the end of this thing here. And you already made your offensive player of the game here with Brock. I would probably agree with you, and I would just caveat it by saying, I think if they, and I don't know why, but if they leaned harder into CMC in the beginning of the game, I think he could have had a gaudy statistical game, because they running to Trent's side, like this dude, they ran it once. I don't remember exactly when, but Trent's out there running and CMC's just behind him. And I was like counting the yards. I was like, is this Emmitt Smith in the 1992 Cowboys again, where he doesn't even get touched? Like, it was just amazing how
an
they
automatic 5 yards. It's
Yes.
like 5 yards guaranteed. If he were just to trip and fall down, he would get 5 yards.
And so, but you know, Kyle looked like he played the long game with this one to set up some stuff, and it worked because they scored, 34 points. But I agree with your Purdy thing. CMC and Debo were extremely valuable, and you got to give it up. Kittle leads the game in receiving yardage because of that long play. And what did you think about his? But I don't know, about 15 yards out, he started.
I love it. I love dudes having fun. I'm not a stodgy guy.
He was doing a drag. He was doing something. It wasn't quite like high stepping like prime time or anything.
He's not quite prime, but yeah. I love George's whole energy is he is, he's an all-timer for me. He is a living 49er legend.
Yeah, absolutely. Defensively, I'm just peeking at the defensive stats to see what it looks like. I want to give it to Nick almost every single time.
Mm-hmm.
He had a 1.5 sacks. He had 1 tackle for a loss. He defended 1 pass. I think he batted 1 down, and then he had 2 quarterback hits. Hargrave, just as impressive statistically, like you mentioned him earlier. And Chase Young did get a 1/2 of a sack. Armstead also got a 1/2 of a sack. So they had 5 in total. Chase Young had 2 quarterback hits. And I forgot, maybe it was Matt Barrows who mentioned this in one of his tweets, but Chase didn't really have the statistics that Nick did, but you could sense that with him on the other side, the defense had to pay attention, or the offensive line had to pay attention to him a little bit more, which kind of opened up Nick, which was sort of the straw man explanation of why this could work. Is just when you have talent on both sides, then you got to pay attention to both guys. So I thought Chase Young, while he didn't and also he maybe, I don't know, he's been playing all year long, but there were certain situations where I sort of thought, I was like, is this dude getting tired? Like maybe just being so fired up, to be on this team and to be back and play after last week. But there were moments where I was like, I wonder if he's a little winded. But the other part of that is what you said earlier, when you can play Chase and Nick, the second Chase needs a break or the second Nick needs a break, then you bring in Farrell, who is like ready to go. You bring in Gregory, who's ready to go. And so to have the depth on the defensive line on the ends like that, is you're always kind of going to have a fresh guy who's just ready to pin his ears back and go at it, which that should be fun to watch as we watch for the rest of the season.
And I was excited one thing I was, I'm a nerd, so I'll just say that straight up. But the one thing I was excited to see and hoping I would see, and we saw it pretty early, was we got Gregory and Chase in there at the same time. So the Ferrari is back. We had that with Umenahue and Ebukam and Nick within the 2 interior guys. So we had the 5 defensive, 3 defensive ends out there, and we could really get after the passer. So that was a great. I love that alignment. We got something out of it, and I hope to see a lot more of it. I have given up on keeping pressure numbers, but I'm betting when the PFF numbers come out tomorrow that Nick has at least 10 total pressures. So he's my guy. I just think that he was dominant today, because there, even on the one where he didn't actually get there, he didn't get the sack, but he blew my man up, and it led directly to the interception. So yeah, I thought Nick was, again, and that's, we've been, it's been disgusting talking about Nick and how, like, some people have been like disappointed. The dude like leads the league in pressures. He's second in the league in pass rate win share. He just hasn't been getting sacks. And it's kind of like the home run hitter he's hit a bunch of doubles, but he hadn't hit it over the fence. It's not like he's having a poor season. He might not be playing to the level of the defensive player of the year, but this notion that he's been a disappointment this year is just kind of ridiculous to me. He's been a force, and he's been, right up there with Garrett, because I think Micah has even taken a step back. He's been right up there with Garrett and Watt as the best defensive ends in the league. So this notion that, he has been like a disappointment for us is kind of nonsense to me. And I just, as we saw today, the sacks are going to come. And I think that by the end of the season, we're going to look up. He's going to be right up there at the top of the league in all of those categories, like he was last year. If we saw today, he was dominant. So I think the 3 or 4 sack game is coming. He's got it. That's booting up. So, and then he has that game, and then all of a sudden he's right back up there at the top in that category too, to match all of the other, because all the other pass rush metrics are right there. He is at the top of the league in all of them. It's just sacks where he's trailing behind. And I just think that, again, like the one hit where he all but gets there, dude gets rid of the ball, but it's a pick. Well, technically, if that's what we're saying, that pressures don't matter, well, clearly that's a fallacy, because that pressure led directly to a turnover. So, yeah, I mean, I just think he is dominant, and I think that the addition of Young just makes this a really, really scary situation, because not only did Nick benefit today, but Hargrave did as well. It's an embarrassment of riches, and I just hope we can keep everybody healthy and that we can move forward. We can get, Womack kind of woven in and try to get him some of those some of those defensive snaps, see what Luter's got.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What did you see of Luter?
I didn't really see any. I'm hoping to isolate him on the all 22, because he obviously Brown got some snaps. I just think at this last portion of the season, we need to try to really see what we've got in these young guys, and see that hopefully maybe one or two of them can do like Ambry Thomas did 2 years ago, and down the stretch really give us some real solid reps. And if that means somebody like Oliver has, takes a back seat, so that we can give these young guys, you got to see what they've got. Unfortunately, they got hurt early. But I think that we'll be better off, and we'll know if they can play, then they can play. If they can't, then, so be it. But you go back to Oliver, and we just, take our chances. But I think it'd behoove us to use these next 5 or 6 weeks to try to see what we've got with these guys. Because I have always been impressed with Womack. I don't really know what happened. He had a really strong beginning of last year, and then he kind of fell off. But I don't know. We see that with young DBs that we saw. Ambry Thomas was slow early, picked up, and then he fell off. And now he seems to be back in good graces, and hopefully he can stay on the field because that's a concern. Our secondary is definitely a concern, and hopefully these young guys can provide some solutions.
Yeah, on the offensive line, it does seem like I don't know if there's even a stat that defines this, but when Trent is in the game, he makes everything look so much better. And from a secondary perspective, like there is some they need some help in sort of figuring out what happens when the pass rush isn't 100% there. So, what did you see anything from Luter in the preseason?
He's very, very athletic, so he's a height, weight, speed guy for real. So it's just a matter of, can he play? That was hard to ascertain in camp because he just didn't get, he wasn't getting as many reps as everybody else was, just being young. But he's got all the talent, and it's kind of tough, throwing him out there in the middle of the season trying to get something out of him. But I just think we need answers, and we need to try to find out what we've got with these dudes. I don't think we can wait till next off season to find that out. We need to see if anybody can step up and give us something as we go down the stretch.
Kyler Murray's doing Kyler Murray stuff. I have the red zone on the TV in this room, and he's looking like Kyler Murray, man. He's kind of always been a problem for the Niners. All right, next week they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is at home, so it is a 105 game. I may not be able to watch this game live, so we may have if we do the post game show, it will probably have to be late because my son is moving. He lives in San Francisco. They're moving to a different neighborhood in San Francisco, so there's a possibility that I won't even really be able to watch the game until I get home. So Rod and I will kind of keep in touch about when we're gonna record. But I just have to figure out a little bit more information from my son. Like if it's up to me, I'm like, hey, 8:00, let's go. You be ready and let's move and let's get this thing going. I don't want to be doing it at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night. So I'll have to ask him.
Good luck with that. I hate moving.
It sucks. And his place is where he, I mean, if you know San Francisco, a lot of these places are so small. So, and then it's kind of like 3 different flights of stairs and taking stuff down. And so it's going to be a tough one, but yeah.
Oh my God.
But all right. We will be back next week at some point. I will try and be as communicative as possible when that time is, but I still have to figure out when I am needed on Sunday. So, all right. For Rod, I am Double G. Niners won 34-3. Hopefully, like Davis, aka Drip, says, we're back. That was his two-word statement. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.